Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Stream live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis. I'm the president and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation, and I'm joined this morning by my good friend and brother,
Tommy Lewis, president and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Tommy, man. How you doing?
Eric, I'm doing great. It's a beautiful, crisp, I'll say it's a cold Saturday morning.
Woo.
Cold Saturday morning. But it's cold outside and it's warm in our hearts and our spirits. And it's great to be with you again.
Absolutely, man. Great to be with you as well. Tommy, how was your week, man?
This week was a whirlwind, Eric.
Right.
I just returned from the city of Ann Arbor, Michigan on last evening. So I was up there for a day and a half. We were doing some work with the public services and just working in team building, right? And during this time, not only with these workers being outside in the elements all day, every day, there's also the pressures, stresses, and tensions that we all have endured because of the global pandemic, the coronavirus. Right. So I was working with them. These folks, professionals, good intended people, are just overstressed and overwhelmed. So we were working with their mental health and mental well-being through the activities of team building. Then earlier this week, Eric, working virtually with our clients out in Colorado, down in Norfolk, Virginia, across the nation, maybe 5 or 6 other states. But at the end of the day, what I'm learning, Eric, is that people are wanting 3 things for the most part. They're wanting to be heard.
Yes.
More and more, Eric, people want to be heard. If it's an individual or if it's a group of folks, I want to be heard. Secondly, that we want our voices to be heard, and if at all possible, we want something to be done, right? We don't want it to just be heard and then it goes off into cyberspace or goes off into a file cabinet of notes being taken, but we want something to be done. And then third, we want everyone to be held accountable, from the board of directors all the way down to the person just coming onto the job that first day. We want everyone to be held accountable. And so that's how our week has been, just really holding people accountable, working with folks, and then setting some processes and strategies to achieve that goal. It's been a very, very productive week.
Good, Tommy. Tommy, that's always good to hear, man. Same way with us. We remain very busy working with global companies. I'm enjoying continuing to work with more CEOs and those leadership teams, man, and helping them to work with some of the conflict, some of the PTSD that they're dealing with through COVID and, the other stresses that they're navigating, man. And that's been an interesting space. I gave a lot of feedback to leaders around the intercultural developmental inventory. We've been doing some assessment work with leaders. And surprisingly, some of the top leaders have even been at the acceptance mindset. So
really?
That sort of 5 global mindsets, from monocultural to intercultural, moving from sort of denial, polarization, minimization, acceptance, and adaptation. Had a couple of senior leaders, CEO at the acceptance level, man, and that's powerful to see how that manifests itself as well. It's one thing for there to be a test, but to see how some of these leaders are operating in the things that they're committing to in ways that are different than we've seen at others has been validating for the instrument itself. But also seeing people that are not as defensive about some of their orientations, even when they're at that sort of denial, polarization level, saying, you know what, kind of lines up with some of the things I was concerned about. Some of them are seeing that the way they grew up, the households that they grew up in, or even the function that they operate in today is one that pushes them more towards denial and polarization. So that's been really interesting to see that work played out. Also working with DEI leaders, man, that think that you can get this whole work done, Tommy, in a speech. I don't know if you had that experience. Can you come, give a speech, and sort of cover everything? And, this is the process. It takes a while. I know that people want to do the right thing, man, but, it takes a while. It takes a real commitment to this work. But I'm just grateful for that. Still exploring buying these significant businesses. And so that's been an ongoing learning process. This week, Tommy, I had a chance to meet and chat with the highest ranking African American at Ernst & Young. Powerful individual, brilliant individual, down to earth individual, man. And so I've been meeting, a lot of times people, when we don't know each other, people just assume that people of color don't always support each other. But man, I've just been refreshed by meeting some powerful African-American leaders who are down to earth and, people like you and myself and John that just want to kind of help somebody else, make the most of life. So,
Eric, I appreciate that. And I appreciate it because what I've learned, and you already know this, and our special guest, John, absolutely knows this, that this life is, one, it's fickle, right? There's anything that can disrupt life,
that's right.
Change life. And this life is short, believe it or not. It is right. In the greater scheme of things, the arc of the universe, our lives are very, very short. They're minute. A strong 70 years, if we live a good life, maybe 80, maybe if we get to 90, 95, that's a well-lived life. And so those who are professionals and have achieved certain accomplishments, what you said with regards to African Americans, sometimes our accomplishments, our individual accomplishments that we've been helped by others, kind of informs our ego and pride to a level that is above the arch, right? And that we become bigger than life itself. In the scheme of it is, no, this is only for a short period of time, because we've had leaders like this 100, 200 years ago, right? And those leaders set the foundation and continue the foundation for what we do today. So I believe that leadership is humble, leadership is active, leadership is collaborative, right? Yeah. And so and that will diminish, if not, start to reduce that era of arrogance and ego and pride, and really be action-based and be a servant leader, really serve the people that we're trying to lead.
Right. And I appreciate that, man, what you were just saying there, Tommy. Humble, servant leadership mindset. Man, that's so powerful, man. And I think that certainly we need to embrace that more, but that needs to be told more too.
Yes, sir.
I think so often people focus on the negatives, that we don't know how many refreshing leaders there are out there. Just because we don't see them screaming on TV every night, doesn't mean that they don't exist. And I'll go to one last place, Tommy, and this is a segue to our guest, John Henderson. We're going to talk about today the pivot mindset. This is a concept that John Henderson, a business leader, has been talking about here and socializing among other leaders. And certainly other people have mentioned that. But I've listened to some of his thinking around that. And I think it's so critical that we introduce this to some, that we look at it, from our own standpoint, and help society to sort of look at what does it mean to engage in this pivot mindset. So for the last month now, my wife, my daughter, and myself have made a pivot.
Yes, sir.
Towards healthier living in the form of exercise, physical exercise, 4 days a week. Now, I can tell you that I've been thinking about that for years.
Yes, sir.
But ever since college, I don't think I've had a time where I've been sort of super inspired to do the kind of workouts that we had to do when you and I were playing ball and playing sports.
Yep.
And so what I've learned over the last probably 5 years is that vanity was insufficient to get me to exercise on a regular basis. In other words,
come on.
Drop a few pounds here and there. That wasn't going to do it, man. That wasn't motivation enough. But what was motivation enough is when I got connected with my wife and my daughter. There's two things that moved us this way. One was mobility, the impact of a lack of healthy living on my personal mobility. So vanity won't do it, mobility will. But secondly, there is this amazing synergy that comes from working with your family. And so showing up each day because you're showing up for the other family member, my wife and my daughter, who I know have goals around being healthier. So, man, we've been getting up 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and doing our workout together. I have also, Tommy, believe it or not, I've been drinking water.
Drinking water every day, Eric.
I've been thinking about water for a long time, but I'm just now finally getting the motivation to bring one of these little jugs of water. And Tommy, I'm already seeing some benefit from that. I'll give you one last story, and then we're going to bring John up. I feel like God shared with me sort of in a vision a number of years ago that, Eric, you're constantly making sure that you put premium gas in your car, and then you put less than regular gas in your body. And I was like, wow, man, that is true. I'm just eating all kind of junk in my body, which I need. In the car, I'm treating it like a king. So I think that all of us need to look at what does it mean to sort of include, engage, embrace in this pivot mindset. And so we're going to invite John Henderson to the table. John, how are you, my friend?
I'm well. I'm really well. It's -4 degrees here, so I'm staying inside.
Tell people where you are, John.
I'm in Detroit. Well, actually outside Detroit, a little small town called Wixom, about 30 miles northwest of the city. I've been here for a really long time, it seems like. Sorry, right? I wasn't born here, but this is where I ended up.
Okay. Well, John, I'd like you to sort of introduce yourself to our community. Tell them a little bit about your background, man, and some of the things that you've done. And then we'll go into this conversation that I'm quite interested in having you share some of your thoughts.
Well, I'll certainly give you the abbreviated version. I kind of smiled a little bit when Tommy was talking about age. I had my birthday yesterday, day before yesterday.
Okay.
I turned 72.
Yes, sir.
I'm really, really excited about that. And to have my mobility and get up, dress myself, feed myself, all that, right? At 72.
That's right.
I'm really pleased that God has had me to see this far this way. I am by training and schooling, all that, a banker, a finance person. I've had roles in corporate America as CFO and cash manager and all that sort of stuff. I became an entrepreneur in the late 90s. I bought my first company, actually the early 90s, I bought my first company in 93. I'm what you might call a serial entrepreneur. I've, made it and lost it and made it and lost it and all that entire roller coaster. But I've managed in the last 15, 20 years to, kind of stabilize and not have that roller coaster. But it's enabled me to really begin to think about some of the things that matter in my life and in the lives of people that I know. And the one thing that comes with age usually is wisdom. It's not always true, Tommy, but sometimes it is. And the opportunity to look at what it is you've seen. Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun, right? So we have that opportunity. And so this whole thing around pivot mindset was one of those sort of wisdom whispering in my ear one early morning last February. And it's begun to take root, and I've begun to really look at it and think about it and talk about it. And I've actually created a team to help me to bring it forward, right? And so we'll talk more about that in a bit. But that's my background. Married, 3 kids, all that. just especially settled in life with my family. Just that by itself is an amazing accom- accomplishment, right?
Yes, indeed.
So very, very, very happy with that part. You may remember I'm also an elder and ordained reverend as well. So that informs my conversation. And I think it makes a really big difference in the observer that I am, right?
Yes.
Um, 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 I think that what we're able to do or not do is tied to the observer that we are, what we know, our worldview. We can't really do anything beyond our worldview, and anything somebody brings to us beyond our worldview, we can only execute within our worldview, and that really has substantial impact on the work that you do. I know that at the root of it, what you're doing is getting with people and having them to examine what it is they believe and how it is they're being as human beings, and I applaud you for that.
Right.
We have the
Thank
right person on the show this morning. Good
you.
grief. I'm excited about the conversation. Thank you, John, for sharing so much about yourself and insight. In short term, from my perspective, and I'll throw it back to Eric, I think there's, obviously we've heard there's one opportunity to make a, first impression.
Sure.
And for our community who have been with us for a number of years, I'm excited for them to be introduced to you and your mindset, your pivot and ideology around the pivot mindset, as well as, if not as important, your energy and your spirit. I think that that's what we're needing today, is to connect that mind, heart, and hands so we can move forward. So thank you for being with us this morning.
John, I want to go back and just sort of zero in. You said the older I get, you begin to reflect on life a bit differently. And you sort of almost look at it in a deeper sense. It felt like almost a deeper sense of what really matters. There's a thought of mine that says that when we are younger, we are so busy running in this race. And it's almost like we're looking across the sides and we're seeing people and we're running and we're seeing people and we're just in life that way, caught up in it. And it's almost like our kids that are on their digital device all day long. They're just in it. They're in it. Yeah. And so there are very few moments for us to pause, to sort of slow down, pause, and think about life. Not just be in it and doing it, but to pause and to think about life. And it sounds like that may be what you're mentioning, that you sort of pause. The older we get, we have a chance to pause and sort of think about what's most important. It's so, I really want you to sort of see if you can help us to see what you saw that got you to the place where you said the pivot mindset.
Honestly, it's not that simple. I didn't. I'm sure you're going to ask me a little bit later. What does faith have to do with this? The pivot mindset was birthed out of a conversation that I, during my meditation time. Right. It wasn't something that I go, oh, gee whiz, I'm smart. Let's think about this. Let's write this down. Let's do this. It was something that appeared as just, a flash in the moment. And initially, I felt like it was, for me, it was like, okay, John, you need to pivot. God's talking to you. As you meditate this morning, and I wrote it down. It's February 13th last year, and as different things began to show up over time. When I realized that it wasn't just for me, as I began to think about it and talk about it, and as you say, Eric, socialize, I really began to discover that in the face of everything that's occurring right now, the relentless disruption to our lives as people, as human beings, and we can certainly talk about these things having gone on before, but we're in a different place now as human beings. And so it didn't just fall on me like, John, great idea, let's go do this.
Right.
It was a journey. And I think it was available to me because I am at a stage in my life where I am more reflective. Um, what happens, is that we do pause, even at the younger ages that you're talking about, to deal with those things that matter to us, especially the ones that are knocking on the door, right? Banging their door down. You will deal with me, whatever the matter is.
Wow.
And we pause and deal with that, whether it's our children or our careers or our lives. But generally, the moments are far between, and it's really when that pounding at the door gets really loud that we stop. We've done something to our body, or we've done something to our mind, or we've interrupted our lives. We've done something really stupid or really smart, and that causes us to pause for a moment. The issue is that we're not necessarily equipped with everything we need in order to really deal with that subject, with that matter. And so as we get older, we develop, experiences, and life happens to us, and we know that that works and that doesn't work, or if I press that button, this is what's going to happen. We learn those things. And so I was merely just at a moment in time when I could hear pivot mindset, right?
That's powerful. Tommy, if you had a question, but I want to ask a related question because you said February 13th of last year. But let me ask you to go back before February 13th. And my sense is, as I think about you, that people have sought your counsel for decades when they were in need of a pivot. Is that true? And how do you tie that to this sort of becoming a revelation? Because I imagine with with the wisdom that I've gained from you and experienced with you, man, you're just somebody that when people run out of ideas on their street, they are running to you to say, "What do you have? What can you help me with?"
You know, um, with all the humility that I can muster, I don't know that I've been out in front of it the way that you just described it. That would be nice, but I think myself, one, just having a heart to share with people, just
Yeah.
wanting to, I've been just really blessed with a care for people for a long time in my life, and so it just shows up. I'm available for people, and that's really what we're not, right? Um, Oftentimes when we ask someone how they're doing, we really don't want to know, right?
Right.
Oftentimes when we enter conversations, we have these general conversations without any depth or meaning. And you know me to be different. The very first time we talked in that hallway at the convention center, where we talked for almost 3 hours standing there, right? It was just a rich, fulfilling kind of conversation that I thrive for. And I think that's what made the difference, because I don't think that you were used to that as well, right?
Right.
Just coming up. So the fullness and the availability that I think I am for people is what shows. And if that looks like wisdom, if that seems like wisdom, then great. I'm the first to tell you, free advice is worth exactly what you pay for it, right? So,
Hey, John, could
yeah.
you talk a little bit about within the pivot mindset, the model,
Hmm.
even the practice, what you're doing? Could you talk about the sacrifices that you've had to make to really commit and dedicate to the go forward kind of behavior of a pivot mindset?
Wow. Wow.
Right.
No one's asked me that. That's a huge question, because there have been sacrifices, but not the way you think. It's not, I spend less time with my wife, or it's not like that. It's what of myself am I willing to sacrifice? What idols and ideologies do I have about me that I'm willing to sacrifice and not have be in the way? And so I mentioned a little bit ago that I put the project on pause. I put the project on pause, and what I did was to spend several months studying, the whole notion of what is it to be a human being in the area of moods, language, conversation, and I had to give up so much of what I already believed in, what I already thought about me. I'm not talking about facts and figures and the earth is round and all that. I mean, John is this, John is that sort of thing. I had to give up. I had to be willing to relinquish that, right, and make my own personal journey in that area, right. So to discover that oftentimes it's me that's in the way of what it is I say that I want to accomplish, or what it is I want to do. It's me that's in the way, and that's not always crystal clear. We want to point or look or not blame. I don't mean it like that. We're not talking to people, I believe, they're into the blame game, but we don't necessarily understand. The interesting thing about a car is that we got rear view mirrors, right? We've got side mirrors and mirrors here. And when we want to know where we've been or what's going on behind us, we just look up. When we want to change lanes, we look over to the side. Life is a little bit like that, except most of us aren't clear what our rear view mirrors look like. And even if we knew that we had them, we're not really clear on what's in there. What was that image showing me, right? What happened in the first marriage and the second marriage? What would happen in this relationship or that relationship, or this job or that job? How is it preventing me from accomplishing what it is that I want to accomplish? I heard not too long ago this sort of formula. It is O is equal to A plus R, where A is action and R is results. The O is me, the observer, right? So we look at something, we take an action, and it doesn't result in what it is we think we want to accomplish. We go back and change the action, and we try it again. We go back and we change the action, and we try it again. We've done that so many times in human history. What we don't do is go back and say, wait, what is the observer seeing? Such that this is the action that I can take and the results that I'm accomplishing. We don't know or see that who I am in the matrix, who I am in the equation, needs to adjust. It's not simply changing the action. Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes, but most often it is, how is it that I'm looking at it? How is it that I'm experiencing it? What am I bringing to the conversation that can produce a different set of actions or eliminate some actions that I was taking, right? In order to accomplish the results that I'm interested in. In your work, this is why I say so much of your work is focused on who we are. It's dealing with the person. It's not necessarily, the actions are important, but if you want a different result, it's a combination of the observer and the action, right? And so that's what the pivot mindset is about. And I had to say all that to really get at it. It really is about who I am as a human being in the equation of action equals results, right? It's that. And there's a subtitle to the book that we're trying to write, The Pivot Mindset. And the subtitle is The Practice of Powerful Conversations That Create Change. That's what we're up to. It's the conversations that we have that create change. It's the willingness to listen or hear at a different level. It's speech acts, if you will. I make a request, or you make me an offer, or I declare, we're going to have a man on the moon in 10 years, right? I make a declaration. These are the kinds of speech acts, if you will, that create change, that cause change. And then looking at the individual, the observer, making those speech acts is the very first place we stop.
Well, I'll tell you, that is so powerful, John. Thank you, Tommy, for a great question, and John for a profound answer. Observer, action, results. In golf, one of the challenges of golf is that the golfer cannot see themselves. So they're literally trying to hit a ball correctly, but they can't see themselves. And so then it makes it harder for them to make adjustments. I think that life in many ways is the same. that we as the observer are the golfer that can't really oftentimes see ourselves. So what input do you have? And I think that it may come right out of that. Powerful conversations is certainly one of those attributes or things that can add to that. But what do you then suggest to people around getting feedback from a trusted advisor, coach, or somebody else?
You know, the key is what you just said. We're not practiced. You know, we don't. There's no sort of traditional learning and teaching, if you will, that promotes the notion of practice in this area. Right? We're not practiced at this kind of looking and thinking and talking. We have a number of other replacements for it that we sometimes depend on. So in that tagline, if you notice, the very first keyword is the practice. It's the practice of conversations that create change. It's conversations like this where we're informed, we have an understanding, we have the, when you use the term advisor, I like to think of it like this: who or what are the voices, the credible voices that are in your life? Who do you listen to? Who do you talk to? Who do you read? Who do you not read? What, as they say in church, what do you let in your ear gate or your eye gate? Right? It's that fundamental. And there's a story about Alexander the Great talking to, I believe, Seneca was one of his teachers. And when he first met Seneca, he was on the porch and he kind of walked over to him and he asked him, "What is it? I'm Alexander. You know, what is it that I can give you?" And Seneca said, "You can get out of my light." Right? You can get out of my light. And so one of the things that we don't understand is that in today's world, your most valuable asset isn't your time. Your most valuable asset is your attention.
Yes,
that's
sir.
That's what companies are
Wow.
paying for.
Wow.
That's what they're monetizing.
Wow.
That's what they're driving you for, whether it's Facebook or it's your attention. It's your time on screen that equates into revenue, billions and trillions of dollars in revenue, by the way. And so if I can get your attention, I got you. Right? And so we're not clear on how we're being informed or when we're being informed or what that information is doing to our observer selves, the way that we look at the world and what it is we do.
John, I'm going to tell you that I have just had a mindset shift. And yes, praise him and praise you and thank you. That attention that you just mentioned woke me up to a number of things. And so I'm going to ask you, throw it back to Eric here. Now that we have looked in our personal rear view mirrors, we've been able to see some things or not, and we're looking forward to this pivot mindset, and we come into the realization of who we are, at least in that moment. What are your thoughts around when I arrive to who I am? I either love who I am and it's my destiny, it's my path, or this, I know who I am and it's not what I have hoped it was, or it's exactly what people have been telling me all of these years. It is a tough pill to swallow. How do I then not pivot back to, I'm going to be comfortable in being back to the old rearview mirror me and not really have to deal with this new reality me? It's not really new. It is the reality me.
So what you're saying is, how do you avoid asking for the red pill?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's it, John. That's it. Thank you for making that brief and short, making it plain.
Yes, sir. Make it plain, right?
Because we do recall in the movie, and we know what movie we're talking about. One person did actually say, "Give me the red pill. I don't want this other thing." You know,
sure did.
I know this isn't real meat, but you know,
right.
Well, that is a question that really does require the practice. Whether you like it or not, I don't know the answer to that. So let me say that right off the bat. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what you do as an individual when you come to that fork in the road, right? I think this is, for me, one could get to be very, what's the word? When you look out at the world and you're agnostic, you don't believe in anything, or the only thing you do believe in is your own ability to, get things done or move through life. Uh, from my perspective, that's a very weak place to stand. Right. I depend on my faith. I can't recommend it enough, but people do what they do. Right. And so to me, the Bible makes a lot of sense. To me, God makes a lot of sense.
Yes, sir.
That old song, you don't believe in God. What's wrong with you? That's my point about it. But again, like everything else, practice does help. I mean, it's when you first come up against it, there's a lot of, oh, no, that's not me. There's a lot of that, right? Because it's new, it's different. It's not what we've been taught or shown, right? There are some that are very. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that really inhibit our ability to have the results that we want or the accomplishment that we seek are the things that are in our way, our moods, and for example, so well, I don't feel like that. I'm not in the mood for that, right? And what we don't recognize sometimes is that I may not feel like it, but what's called for in the moment is to do that, right? And for those of us that spend so much time in school and college, we know I don't feel like studying, but we know that if we didn't, or I don't feel like practicing, we know that if we didn't, we won't perform well on the field, right? Excellence is birth in preparation, not demonstration, right? You practice to your good. You don't get good just walking out on the field, do you, Eric?
Right. That's right. That's right.
It doesn't happen that way. So our ability and what do I mean by moods? Anxiety, fear, ambition, serenity. I mean, these are things that we're all in at different points in time, and they kind of like just happen to us, right? It's not like I think I'll be ambitious today. It doesn't happen like that. We kind of look up and we find ourselves in the mood. It's there. The ability to recognize those and to do the kinds of things that still move you forward. It's a practice. It's not something that we're born to do with. I mean, and what's happened is that there was a time when we could just sort of, amber along and things would, kind of show up, things happened over a longer period of time. With the recent disruptions in society, whether they're, COVID as an example, these kinds of things have been accelerated. So the pace of change is not what we're accustomed to. Yes, we're accustomed to change. We know that the only thing that doesn't change is change, right?
Right.
But the pace that change is now approaching is bombarding us, whether it's, COVID, whether it's technology, whether it's diversity and inclusion, social justice. These things have not been this way in our lifetimes. Now, they're not alien to man. They've happened, hundreds of years ago and before, but in our lifetimes, they've not. And so they're new to us. And the thing that's really hard to understand for most of us is that who we are as human beings are different than the lady that told her Roman son, come home on your shield or with it, right? We're in very different places as human beings. And so the technology that we have, the enablers that we have, cause us to ask questions at a different level. I am now able to go online and research things for myself. I have to be careful what's true or not true, whatever that means, right? Um, um, that makes me a different kind of person. I do believe that one of the really wealthy technologists of our time is working on a microchip to go on our brain so that we don't have to talk anymore, right? What kind of human being will that person be? We're already at the point where a lot of our bodies, we now have the capability of replacement parts, a hip, a knee, a liver, a heart, right? At what point will we be something different, right? There are those that believe that the way to do that is through the mechanical things that I just mentioned. There are others that believe that it's chemical that will enable us to do that, and all that. So that's a whole different conversation that I get into occasionally. But
right, John, let me ask you this. So my mind is just bursting wide open with questions and thoughts and everything. Let me throw a couple things at you and then have you respond. One, we are creatures of habit. I know that when I was in school, if I'd get to the end of the quarter and didn't do well, I'd make myself a promise that the next quarter I'm really going to get after it. And I would, but then at the end, I'm back to the same old, didn't do it again this time. Next quarter, I'm really going to. So number one, we're creatures of habit. And the pivot mindset, for it to be something more than a snazzy statement for me and a wish in my mind that I'm going to get better, there has to be some key elements of how we get there. And then when I think spiritually, maybe this is a pivot that Christ was offering. He would meet with people and he would do things for them. He would heal them. He would bless them. Or he would often say, go and sin no more. In other words, declaring a pivot. And so I'd like to follow some of those people to say, what did they do after he said that to them? How many of them sustained the pivot that he had whispered to them after he did all the stuff for you and healed you and everything? He said, go and sin no more. And I think he said that he was a human, he was man. But there seems to me that certainly God has some understanding that they're going to sin. And so I say all those things to say, what are the key elements to be able to realize this pivot?
Well, we're working on that. But by that I mean we're still in the process of, as I talked with you, we're still having interviews, we're still taking notes. We're in the process of dissecting these things into a podcast with the overall goal of doing either a digital book, as you suggested, or actually a traditional book. But one of the things that we're asking ourselves now are, what's the skill set that one who embarks on this path need or want to develop? And a couple things come to mind right away. So, for instance, when we look at this, one of the questions we ask is, what skill set must a citizen have in order to be a contributor in the 22nd century, right? And they're kind of really simple, right? So one, as a for instance, is that people have to be comfortable around technology today, right? You can't be technology agnostic and participate in the world today. And so that's one. People have to be able to work in small teams and be comfortable with that team changing format regularly, right? The day of going and working someplace for 20 or 25 years, that's kind of gone, right? The smaller teams contributing on that team. These are skill sets that one has to develop, and there, a list that I've got of 4 or 5 that I'm still working on. So there are. So one of the analogies that I take place or really have begun to admire. A friend of mine sent me not too long ago a YouTube video of his friend's son who had become a championship surfer, right? And he wanted me to see the elegance of this person in a wave, right?
Wow.
And what I saw right away was the notion of navigating rather than, how do I get this, right? Because this guy, who certainly had to develop enough skill to be on the board in the first place, so that there is skill development, but he's in the middle of 100-foot wave, right? No control over those elements, no ability to turn it off or stop it. But the skill to navigate in that tunnel, right? And being in that zone. And so as the events that we're talking about, I've likened them to a 100-foot wave. The 100-foot wave of COVID, the 1,000-foot wave of diversity that you guys are in every day. You have figured out how to navigate in that wave, right? How to bring people along with you.
That's right.
And there are times when you're up in front of people that you're in the zone, you're saying and talking things, and you're dealing with the moment, right? A person stands up and has a question. You really don't have a prepared answer, but you have that skill set that enables you to actually speak in that person's life in such a way that it makes a difference. Navigating becomes the pivot. It's not simply,
come on.
Boy, you preaching. You preaching better than we saying amen right now.
Oh my goodness.
So I saw that in this film, and I began to liken what it is. So what does a surfer? Yeah, you have to learn enough to be able to get up on the board and stay on the board, balance yourself, and all the rest of it. Know when that's a bad wave, don't go into it. You have to know that. But the key is, how do we navigate these conversations is now what I'm looking at. So for me, the practice of powerful conversations that create change becomes a real sort of listening, much more so than talking, right? We won't do it here, but certainly I'd asked you, why did you ask that question? What was important to you about that question? And we begin to get at, then what do you care about? Then I can make a difference in your life.
That's huge. And I can affirm that in this way, that coaching is not always about, you providing the answers. It's most about asking the right questions. And certainly I have found that as we ask those right questions, we get a sense. I remember, John, when I used to do sales presentations 15 years ago, when I felt like the sales presentation was all about me saying the right things, talking the right words, giving the right research. And once I learned that one of the most powerful things that I could do is introduce myself and ask them a series of questions, because those questions would inform me around, it would sort of illuminate the pathway to success, because now I can adjust, pivot my message to go along the pathway of what you're most interested in.
I want to point out something you just said, and I want to rephrase it a bit. You said in listening, you could become informed as to the pathway that would lead to success. I believe that's almost word for word, right? I'd like to offer the following, that by listening or asking questions, you explore with the individual what their cares and concerns are. And then you begin to address them at the point of their need. Right?
Absolutely.
My prayer for myself and for the people that are really close to me when I'm praying is that, God, would you meet us at the point of our need? Anywhere else is almost irrelevant. Anywhere else is kind of
yes.
And so what you've done is, take on that practice of exploring with another human being their world, Because you got to understand something. We all live in a world, and they're not the same.
Right.
Right? Every observer world is different. How I see things, how I view this conversation isn't how you view it. Right? Great that there are some overlaps. So that's what I would offer, and that if you actually begun to practice it from that understanding, right? Not that it's a pathway to your success, and it is, but it's a pathway to explore what the other human being is concerned about.
Oh, absolutely. 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 Yeah, it's a shortcut to say success.
Yeah.
Success means given the opportunity to meet their needs.
Yeah.
The previous method is about you. It's you centric. The change is about client centered and understanding where they're coming from. Tommy?
And so as you were sharing so many, as our community says, dropping these gems this morning, John, like Eric, my mind is exploding. I am revisiting conversations. I'm knowing that I'm going to have to continue to practice these conversations. So I want to ask you, now that we are moving into the conversations, external conversations with other human beings, and then those internal conversations, particularly with our moods, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, John, is creating a lot of noise, right? It's a lot of noise. Can you talk about how to silence the noise to be able to ask the right questions, right? To to really get to the core and not be distracted with all the squirrels and things like that, squirrel, chipmunk, and all the noise. But what is the power of silence in the pivot mindset?
You know, that's going to take us a while to really unpack. It is a very, very powerful question.
Yes, it is.
I would say, first of all, that in the middle of the wave, the surfer doesn't hear the noise.
Yes, sir.
Right.
He's in the zone. It's not that the noise isn't there, right? And so when you say silence the noise, you know, that may not be where you want to go.
Right.
One of the things I've heard recently is that, can I be serene in the midst of unsettlement? What you're going to find out is that as you go down this conversational path, the noise is going to get louder, because the thing you're going to see right away is things that you've blocked out, that you've not made yourself available to, that are important to what it is you say you want to do, right? And so the noise is going to get louder. I will almost assure you that the voices, you know, you're going to be open to voices that maybe you weren't open to before.
Yes,
and
sir.
so the noise is going to get louder. It's not going to get silent, right? And so it's only through practice, and I'm talking about thoughtful, purposeful, intentional practice. I don't mean, you know, you may only do it once a week, then it's twice a week, then it's 3 times a week. You have to remind yourself. You may have to put a little buzzer on your, you know, okay,
right,
on your calendar in order to do it. But over time, you know, when there is a guy, I think his name's Stephen Kotler. I can't. He's a surfer also, but he has a practice where he really works with companies about being in the zone. I think his last name is Kotler, Kotler, I think, and he teaches or instructs companies on how to be in the zone.
Yeah.
He takes advantage of the athletic notion of being in the zone, right? And he teaches that, right? And what I understand, I don't know the story to be true, is that he was once very, very ill in his body. And his friends said, you know, went and got him and made him come out and took him down to the ocean and put him in the water, and he went surfing. And when he was surfing, his body responded in ways that it wasn't responding, and he began to understand this thing about the zone and to practice the zone and being in the zone, and to the point that he recovered, right? And so I would recommend that you just practice being in the zone, because there's an old saying from one of the groups that what we resist persists, right? And so if you're trying to push away something, it's just going to be stronger, right? So the other piece is a biblical story that we all know, when Peter asked Jesus, bid me to walk on the water. I want to walk on the water, right? And he had enough, courageousness that he stepped out of the boat and he walked. And as long as he had his eyes on Jesus, he was fine. But the minute that he began paying attention, remember, that's our most valuable asset now.
Yes.
The minute he began to pay attention to the winds and the waves is when he began to sink. Right? So learn to live in the zone in the midst of all of it, because that's the distractions of the world today are just going to get higher. Are we going to have a war with China? I don't know. Is the Taiwanese and Ukraine and Russia? I don't know. Is Bitcoin going to take over? I don't know. Is COVID going to be with us forever? I don't know. Is technology going to? It's all there. Yes. It's all there, right? So I'd be less willing to push it away and find a way to be in the zone within it.
Yes, sir.
Right. I love that answer because it provides us with a simplistic sort of thing to think about. But Tommy, I've been there too, and I've stumbled going one path and then seen greater result going another path. And so I was just writing down some thoughts about when the noise is happening in my mind, when I'm talking to a leader, sometimes who's saying something crazy. I put these down: calm over anger. So if noise of anger, not that, calm that way. Caring for others versus criticizing. So if something in me wants to criticize, nope, don't go that way. Care, go another way. Affirming, loving over despising, sort of seeing the human versus seeing the opponent. And when I began to choose those, because those are the things that are running around, the noise is happening in my head, I flash off. I get angry. You said something that set me back. And I want to respond. I want to react. But if I choose godlier things over flesh, that's really what the battle is. It's the spirit over the flesh. And so when I choose spiritual things, which for me can be summed up in love, that's what I try to carry with me on my good days. Yeah. Then you catch me on some average days, and you might get the guy that just
get something else.
Get something else.
Right. I want to, kind of piggyback on that a bit in the few minutes that we have left. So the pivot mindset is not, after everything that I've just said, is not simply a series of actions or even practices. The pivot mindset is intended to introduce a way of being that becomes more natural over time. And what you just said, Eric, kind of speaks to that. Yes, when we can remember, like you said, you catch me on an average day, it might not be that way, right? But if we put it at the level of, this is my way of being, this is who I am, how it is I show up, that it doesn't matter. I don't have to catch myself. And at first, that's exactly what it will be. I got to catch myself.
Right.
Because if I don't catch myself, you might get me on an average day. But if it's my way of being, it's who I am.
Yes.
It's who I recognize myself to be. That's just who shows up. Period.
Yeah, that's who shows up every time.
Yeah.
Oh, this is phenomenal. Right. This is phenomenal.
Right. I gave a message for Martin Luther King's celebration that was titled, "What Happens When God Drives?" And so the point was, when God drives, he takes us to the places that we most want to go. And my mind doesn't know that. My flesh says, no, I got to do this. Let me do this. And you're saying if we sort of just start being the way we be. So I tell people now my mind knows that when God drives, it gets better, but it's still hard to get this flesh to line up with that.
That is
John. John, you've got the final word as we come to a close, man. This has been rich, phenomenal, man. You see, we just start scratching the surface, man, but you've touched some people.
Well, we're still working on it. We finished the first year. We've got a bunch of interviews, as you know, in the can. We're in the process of writing some podcasts and some blogs about it. I did pause for a couple of months as I wanted to think through some things and get more direction about where I'm going with it. But it's coming together, and I think before the year is out, we'll have something off the presses for the people to enjoy.
Right, Tommy, you want to read this, man, from Steve as we close out?
Yeah, brother Steve Sanders, he's sitting back listening, as we all have today, and want to thank Steve for sharing this. That he's sharing that we have no idea of how much these conversations have continued to help him in his life and work. Amen. I echo that same sentiment.
I do too, Steve.
Coming together every Saturday morning. Sometimes we have a certain type of fatigue on us or some certain type of excitement, as the good brother John Henderson mentioned, those moods. And every time we've come out with a gem, we've come out. And I will tell you, it was for me, a big splash today, a big splash in my pivot mindset, not just a pebble with a little ripple.
Right.
It is a 100-foot wave that happened to me today. And thank you, John.
Amen. Thank you.
John, I love you, man. I know you're an amazing resource, brother. I knew God had a reason for us to have you on the show today. This has been powerful. To our community, I want to say to you all, I love each of you. Steve, Kenny, Dan, and everybody else, Judy, everybody else that joined us. We really, Tommy and I appreciate you all. Yes. Because you all keep encouraging us that what we're trying to do here has some value to it. The only way that Tommy and I have been able to continue is that we have personally felt that value. John, this morning, you have exponentially helped all of us to grow, man. I thank you. I thank God for the work that he has you doing right now. And I know that you're going to see it through. And as you do, it's going to be a great blessing to these places that we find ourselves in, the pivot mindset. And so we want to tell our community, we'll see you next week, same time, as we have these diversity conversations. Take care now.
Take care.